Hi, it's Barry Chamish for the next 2 hours. We've got a very interesting guest. He is Douglas Willinger. He's been reading me for years, and I guess there are some advantages to this. Now, he is the webmaster and editor of a site called continuingcounterreformation.blogspot.com, and most of this, I think it's going to be his show, although I made notes. A lot of this is just stuff beyond me. Douglas, are you there?
Yes.
Where do we start?
Basically, a whole outlook of reality of the whole occult power of the Roman Catholic Church, Masonic, ancient regime that people don't want to acknowledge, but even though it's actually the ruling shadow government.
I'm all ears. Start at any point, unless you want me to guide you.
If you want to give me a guide, that's okay. But if not, I can speak without that.
All right. Away you go.
Okay. Basically, I've long been fascinated by history and politics, and I remember back in high school when I had second period, it was a library free period, and I was fascinated to go and read the old newspapers and magazines, like the Time and Newsweek type of magazines, and compare how the style of reporting in the years leading up to each of the two major world wars. And what blew my mind was how they were all, very much anti-Kaiserreich. Oh, the Kaiser was the evil devil incarnate, etc. But then in the 30s, these same media journals are saying Hitler's the gentleman. Hitler's a nice guy. And it just seemed to be like the total opposite of what it should have been. It struck me as totally bizarre, but it was just one of the first indications of this phenomenon.
What phenomenon? You're talking about the media being part of the plot? Is that the phenomena?
Yes, including the huge upturn in anti-Jewish writings in newspapers starting around 1919.
Right.
To scapegoat the Jews, so to speak, which was part of the Ledolchowski plan.
Well, you just gave a name that nobody knows about, so I guess you better dive into him.
Exactly. Okay, Vladimir Ledolchowski was the superior general, the Black Pope, if you will, of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order, which runs Georgetown University and by extent the government, etc. He was the Black Pope from February 11, 1915 to December 13, 1942. And he has a very interesting framing of his life, okay? He was the nephew of the Archbishop of an area of Poland that was part of Germany at the time, Posen. It's now known as Poznan. And what happened is when Bismarck was cracking down on the political power of the Catholic Church in the 1870s, this was one of the first things done by the Kaiserreich, 1871 to 1918, was to challenge the Catholic Church. And one of the things it led to was the imprisonment of this archbishop by Bismarck's government for a nearly 2-year period around 1874, 1875, 1876.
I'm lost. You said 1915 to 1942.
Yes, for his reign as superior general.
All right.
He was born in 1866.
Right.
So this is when he was a child.
Okay.
And I have an account from the Washington Post in 1915 that specifically said that he witnessed the Bismarck's humiliation of his uncle as a child.
All right. Who was his uncle?
His uncle was Mieczysław Ledolchowski, Archbishop of Posen.
All right. That was kind of an important fact.
He passed away in 1902, and he was the head of the prefect of the Congregation of the Propagation of the Faith, or on propaganda, in the 1890s. And he is the individual that 1890s article on the New York Times admitted to being a major political influence within the Vatican.
Right. I'm following you. I can't comment.
Okay. Anyway, what was interesting about Ledowchowski, okay, the Ledowchowskis is, okay, Vladimir, okay, he was a young boy when this happened. About a year later, his father gets the smallpox from his older sister and dies. So the person taking charge of their upbringing, a male figure, is the uncle, Mieczysław. Mieczysław was obviously a big influence on his nieces and nephews, because only one of them was going to be a nun, but of the two older sisters. But then the other one decided to become a nun too, the one that got the smallpox. Anyway, Vladimir, he got involved with the Jesuit order very early on. Like, he joined it in 1889 when he was, not more like 23 years old. And by 1906, he becomes the Counselor General for the Catholics for the Vatican for like diplomatic affairs throughout Europe, which is what the importance of that is. All of those pre-war alliances that helped set up World War II, like who was allied with who. For instance, it was very significant that they got Great Britain to be allied against Germany rather than with Germany. That was a major defeat for Protestantism, geopolitically.
Right.
One that, in my opinion, shouldn't have happened. But this is a lot more about Ledowchowski, which I haven't even researched yet. But what I find exceptionally fascinating about Vladimir Ledowchowski himself is he becomes the Black Pope in February of 1915. His predecessor was Franz Werns, a German guy. And what's fascinating, and I think this is statistically improbable, except for it being a coup, was that both Franz Werner and Pope Pius X passed away. They died on the same night, August 19, August 20, 1914, hours apart.
And you're saying that's not a coincidence?
Yeah, exactly, okay. And then Vladimir becomes the Black Pope. And to me, I get the feeling of that Vladimir got them to agree to some sort of let's start a war thing, but Vladimir had an agenda that extended further.
Well, I can add something here that I think is pretty relevant. The Turks allied themselves with the Germans, the Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
Now, just so you know, the Turks were taken over in 1909 by someone named Enver Pasha and his Young Turk Revolution. It was 1908. Well, I'm just going to quote, the Atlantic Monthly of last month. Quote, according to the two most senior of His Majesty's diplomats in Constantinople, Gerard Lowther and Gerald Fitzmaurice, Enver and his associates were rooted in crypto-Jewish Freemasonry, with its adeptness at manipulating occult forces, and modeled themselves in the French Revolution and its godless and leveling methods. The reason I quote that is this is something I know, and I'm not sure if you do or not, but what we call the Sabbateans allied themselves with the Germans. I don't know if this means much to you. It means a ton to me.
I never even knew of that. But it reminds me of the political dynamics that pervade.
All right,
for
well,
instance,
let's
when you get involved in something politically, it's always like a set agenda, and even no matter how flawed the agenda is, it doesn't matter if it's left or right. You can't alter it at all. No matter how much success you have with an idea, once you get beyond the mezzanine level, the second floor of a structure, everything is like, no. It's like it's centrally directed. I've noticed this in numerous things I've been involved with.
Well, if in fact Ledowchowski was manipulating, you're saying he was manipulating the upcoming First World War from behind the scenes.
Yes, with the Zimmerman telegram, which Tupper Southey wrote about.
Yeah, I read the book. I've forgotten the book, but I read the book. It got the war started.
Right, the Zimmerman telegram comes out, and then at that press conference, he's asked about it, in public, and he says, "Oh yes, there's no denying it. We did it." Why, admit it like that? Why not deny it? It was like he was acting like a good little Freemason, good old boy.
Well, in the background to the First World War, unless the Jesuits, unless somehow Ledachowski could manipulate a revolution in Turkey to overturn the Sultan and bring in these crypto-fascistic Freemasonry Jews, and they weren't Jews, they are Sabbateans. That, if you don't know the concept, I'm not going to explain it to you. It would take too long, but there was a split in Judaism about 300 years before, and a very anti-Jewish cult arose out of it
around
in Poland. And it arose not that far from Posen. I'd say 20 miles. That was the cult of Jacob.
What was the year?
Pardon me?
What was the year of the split, roughly?
Well, the split was official in 1666 when Shabtai Tzvi declared himself the Messiah. This was in Gaza, and half the Jews of the world bought into this. It was not a small...
the timeline is fascinating. It suggests a parallel effort.
Well,
like Freemasonry getting big in Great Britain and starting in the late 1500s?
Well, it gets real big later. The Freemasonry movement, in short, summarizing a difficult thing, the Sultan of Turkey forced him to convert to Islam. He did. Most Jews abandoned him, but not a cult in Turkey called the Dogma. They saw in it a sign that we should all pretend we're Muslims, but really believe in Sabbateanism, in the belief that Shabtai Tzvi is the Messiah. In Europe, around 1750, one Jacob Frank, no, a little later than that, was a lot closer to the French Revolution, 1770s, one Jacob Frank became the second Messiah of Sabbateanism. He converted thousands of Polish Jews to Catholicism, and they just became spies. Well, we can go on from that. I may as well. Jacob Frank, he became wealthy for a while using his new Catholics for an intelligence organization, but then went broke. In 84 or 5, he went to Frankfurt, Germany, Frankfurt am Main, and
Germany.
Became very wealthy. And the reason for this, for anyone who bothers to understand, Frankfurt was the conspiracy capital of the world. Besides Jacob Frank, also living in Frankfurt at the time was Adam Weishaupt, who was, of course, the founder. Well, you're aware of who Adam Weishaupt was, of course.
Yes. Responsible for that thing on the dollar bill backside to the left.
Well, I think...
I mean, it's ironic. It is back and to the left.
I think founder of the Illuminati is more to the point now. And also living in Frankfurt was Mayor Amschel Rothschild and his 5 sons. There was a meeting where the world conspiracy began in Frankfurt. Rothschild just had a vision that control a country's economy, and you control the country, but he needed spies. He needed a first-class intelligence team to get this thing going. He brought the greatest conspirators in history together. He brought Adam Weishaupt, and he brought Jacob Frank, and, well, they obviously believed in 2 things. Adam Weishaupt believed in destroying the Protestant Reformation. That was what the Illuminati was up to, and Jacob Frank was involved in destroying any Jew who didn't take Shabtai Tzvi as the Messiah. This is when the world of true blue conspiracy really began. Yeah. There was plenty before, but it went into high gear after that, beginning with the French Revolution and so forth.
Going underground, 1774 to 1814. during the suppression, and that was the same time the United States came into existence?
America was certainly Masonic, but the Masons of 1776 were real decent. What happened is the Illuminati got found out during the French Revolution, and the plans were found. Apparently, a horseman fell and died, and in his satchel were the Illuminati plans
You're
for the
saying
French.
Freemasonry started out as something good?
Yes. Well, what they had to do, they were banned all through Europe, and what Weishaupt did is he simply said, "We've got to go somewhere. Let's take an organization that already exists. Let's infiltrate them, and let's change their tenets." That's when he moved the Illuminati to London, and they gnawed their way into British and Scottish Freemasonry.
Mm-hmm. You don't think that Freemasonry was something that was already being run, like, out of Rome in the centuries before?
Out of Rome, I don't know how to respond to that.
Well, the reason why is because I've seen lots of images of churches, Catholic churches, where they include, the back into the left symbol, the pyramid with the all-seeing eye and the suspended capstone.
That tells you that
just
British
like coins from like Switzerland in the 1500s, they got the IHS on them.
Well, the Illuminati wasn't for 200 years.
Well, I agree that with you that there was definitely some sort of recodification, consolidation of Illuminati powers at that time, represented by what you're talking about.
Well, the Jesuits, of course, were the 16th century,
right.
But the Illuminati was the 18th century.
True.
All right, it's on you go. I just thought I'd, for myself, try and clear things up.
With Ledolchowski, okay? Another case, I said his life is framed. First you have the suspicious, two deaths on the same night, okay? Tell me, that's, saying the basic story is, he got them to agree to World War I, but he had a more extreme agenda. I mean, I think that the agenda he wanted them is like, look, let's have Germany defeat Russia, and we're going to break off the part of Poland that's under Russian rule and make that an independent country. That at least was the plan. But Ledolchowski would have wanted Posen to go back, become Poznan again, and the whole Polish corridor thing, and maybe Franz Werns wouldn't have agreed to that because he was German, or maybe he would have because he's just a Jesuit and they'll sell out their own country.
They sacrificed a Catholic country to Russia?
No, to break it free from Russia.
All right.
Germany would have defeated Poland, and in 1915, the Kaiserreich, created some sort of quasi-independent Duchy of Poland. Congress Poland, basically.
Okay. I mixed up the communist. Well, that was post-World War II. My mistake.
Okay. It was a very different situation than, the two wars. I have books on the Jewish life in Eastern Europe, and they like the German occupation of World War I, and that's why a lot of Jewish people just didn't believe the stories of the Nazis and what they were doing to Jewish people because they remembered the Kaiserreich.
Yeah, I've read that some pretty out-of-touch places actually did welcome the Nazis.
Yeah, because it was the reputation of the guys with the spiked helmets.
The Nazis would send reports that the Jews clearly misunderstand our intentions.
Well, yeah. But that's, that was, the Ledolchowski thing. I don't know the details of, obviously the Holocaust of the Jews, and that was part of the extreme agenda. And maybe Franz Werns wouldn't have been that bloodthirsty. I don't know. These are all, points that I just have not been able to determine. But obviously there was some sort of staged agenda thing, and you see it at the end of Ledolchowski's life. It struck me as soon as I saw his death date, December 13, 1942. Why? Because that was only about 3 weeks after World War II turned against Germany. Stalingrad, the Soviet counteroffensive, started November 19, 1942.
Oh, you're not saying that he died because of Stalingrad.
I'm saying that somebody around him figured out that he set the Third Reich up to lose and poisoned him. In the New York Times, I came across there were a whole bunch of these premature obituaries of Vladimir. Like for about a 5-day period, you start to see, oh, he's dead. Oh, no, he's not dead. He's still alive. And they would make references to him having gastrointestinal problems. That's right in the New York Times. And then they finally announced he was dead for good on December 13th.
Was he so well known that he would make the New York Times?
Well, only about maybe 3 or 4 times in his entire reign. Like when he became, there might have been 1 or 2 articles when he became Black Pope, 1 article when he died, and at the most, 1 between.
Now, of course, we can take that 2 ways. The first way is he really was sick, and he really did die. The other, they were preparing the public for his demise. That one is not clear-cut evidence.
Well, I'm just saying there are these reports where he was dying of gastrointestinal problems. And
so it would have been no shock, of course, when he died, but the question is, maybe he did have gastrointestinal problems.
Oh, yeah, I believe he did. I don't doubt that. But the timing of it, I'm thinking someone poisoned him because they figured out, oh, you set up the Third Reich to lose. He's getting the reports of the Soviet counteroffensive has begun. The Germans, for the first time in the war, are now being pushed back. That was 11 and 13 days, 24 days separating his death and that start of that counteroffensive.
You know, if the Nazis had attacked Stalingrad 2 weeks earlier, they would have taken the place. It was the winter that killed them.
Well, also, too, no long-range bombers to get the industry on the other side of the Urals?
All right, it's a complicated story, but...
or here's another factoid. Eric John Phelps told this one to me. At the end of World War I, the Germans give up, even though they really didn't lose the war. And what it was is that they had like 1 million men in reserves in the East that they could have shifted over to France and kicked Uncle Sam's ass. And they didn't. That Ludendorff was the one responsible for that. Just adding that little factoid.
All right.
And then afterwards, they start blaming the stab in the back of Germany on, quote-unquote, the Jews, which was a total crock. But that was also part of the whole Ledolchowski plan.
All right. I'm going to sort this out, and I'm going to remind the listeners that we're talking about the Vladimir Ledolchowski. He was the Supreme General of the Jesuits. Now, what Mr. Willinger is... Well, he's giving him an awful lot of power, I'll tell you that. Why would anyone listen to him?
To Ledolchowski?
Yeah. Why would he have the ability to twist his finger around history like this?
Because of the position, the Jesuit order, like they start out being the confessors.
Oh, wait, we have got a little break. Very shortly, we part for 3 minutes. But don't hang up.
Okay.
We have a couple of... I'll tell you about the next one. The next one is 7. But this is 3 minutes, and just hang in there. My guest tonight is Douglas Willinger. When we come back, he's going to give out his blog spot, and you can find out more about him. We'll be back in 3 minutes. It's Barry Chamish. I'm back for part 2 of a 4-part... program tonight. My guest is Douglas Willinger. I would say the first thing we should do to clear up any confusion is, Doug, please give away your internet site.
Okay, it's a Continuing Counter Reformation, all 3 words, lowercase, all put together with no spaces, .blogspot.com.
You can do that again. It's a long one.
Continuing Counter Reformation.blogspot.com.
Good. to my listeners, I invite you to go there. It's actually a pretty darn good site. Now, what I'm following with you, it seems to me that you're blaming the First and Second World Wars on the Roman Catholic Church.
Yes.
Well,
yeah. I mean, they totally wired into all of our governments to get them to behave however, they want. They did it with funding Hitler. They did it with puffing up all these leaders.
That's it? I think this is kind of an important thing to discuss.
It's not just through the government, but it's through the media. It's through college fraternities and Masonic orders. I mean, all of that stuff is all interlinked. If you, for instance, I have a blog post on continuing Counter-Reformation. If you scroll down you see on the right side, I have a bunch of articles, and right here, I have Romish Masonic Order. Click on this article called College Frats, the Satanic Luciferian Romish Masonry.
And what's in there?
What's in there, okay. I was doing research on this powerful Washington, D.C. law firm called Covington & Burling. They're involved in every single issue I blog about. And I highly advise going to my blog profile sometime, check out each blog, and hit the tag in each one for Covington & Burling, because they are definitely a major powerhouse player. But anyway, when I was researching them, I found out that the man who founded the law firm, a congressman by the name of James Harry Covington from the Eastern Shore of Maryland, his name pops up in the early history of the FDA, the U.S. Food and Drug Laws, which is another thing I write about, where they basically manipulated the whole agricultural markets to protect the development of Virginia Brightleaf cigarettes and to protect that from the foreign market threat of coca leaf, which is why we have today's cocaine problem, where they perverted it into a concentrated drug. But without digressing on that any further, what I found out about Covington is that he was a Grand Master in his fraternity, which is you look at it's called Kappa Sigma, and the symbols of it combines like Shriner's symbol and that of the Order of the Eastern Star, with the Islamic crescent atop, and it's over a star, and the Eastern Star Masonic Order, they have the star pointed down like satanic style, which makes it look like extra frightening and stuff. And I just noticed as I went onto the website of Sigma Kappa, and right there they have this image of a red ball coming from Verona or Rome, Italy, and going to Northern Virginia in 1867, where they were admitting that the fraternity was founded by a bunch of gentlemen from Central Italy, who then set up this college fraternity.
Why should we be worried?
Pardon?
Why should we be worried about this?
Well, it's constructing basically a motherboard of like a shadow government out of Rome through college fraternities. And if you research other college fraternities, you will see a similar pattern. Or what you'll see is a college fraternity is established by a group of half a dozen Freemasons. So although the fraternity itself might not officially be Masonic, it's controlled through Freemasonry because the people at the top are Freemasons. The general pattern that you're going to see in the establishment of these organizations, because for the conspiracy to exist, you need a hierarchical command. That's what cracks me up about all these people that blame it on quote-unquote the Jews. That's not going to work with just people having a DNA or whatever. No, you need a hierarchy of command, a chain of command to pull anything like this off.
Well, what's at the top of the hierarchy?
According to Phelps, he'd say the Black Pope. Then there's some people that think there's like a ruling families above them, which makes sense. You have this Farnese family. Their name's right on the front of the JESUIT, a Jesuit mother church. And they have their own Pentagon in Italy, with the stairs down a narrow road down a hill. It does, and they have supposedly they have a painting in there of Washington, D.C., as it was envisioned in the 1600s, but you can't get it online. It's just a description of it on the Unhived Mind.
Well, you're naming names that well, most of us are not terribly familiar with. Are you saying that they're at the top, well, that the two world wars came from this family?
Not one family. It'll be a group of families. And it could possibly be the King of Spain you've talked about.
Oh, I can talk about Juan Carlos all day long when it comes to the Middle East and the mucky he's it's your show, but Juan Carlos is certainly got a great deal of power over Israel. A great deal.
Yeah, I suspect they got a great deal of power over the planning of Washington, D.C. as well, because that's the dynamics I encountered, because I am involved in different things. If you go into my profile, you'll see a blog called South Capitol Street. And that was about, there was a proposal to build a greenway extending south of the U.S. Capitol. Like you have today's national malls, like the West Mall, a big piece of grass that extends from the U.S. Capitol to the Lincoln Memorial, and it's got the Washington Monument in the middle of it. They were going to build an extension of that going due south of the Capitol. It was on the front cover of a U.S. National Capital Planning Commission document, 1996. 1997, called Extending the Legacy.
What if they had? What would that mean?
Pardon?
What if they had built it? What would change?
Nothing as far as I know, but the thing is, it was squashed. There was no literature. All the public literature, it had paintings of it, but nothing in the text. And the text was all very vaguely written. It would say Gateway or Boulevard. It would never say Promenade or Greenway or Linear Park.
Well, let's put this in perspective. Why is this important?
Because the dynamics, okay, you would think that if there's a proposal like that, and then there was a controversy, you would see, if you're following planning, you would see people talking about it, you'd see organizations taking different positions on it, you'd see a vigorous public debate. Here there was none. It was squashed. And I was the only person to have a blog about it.
Well, what was your claim?
Environmentalist organizations, they all behave like puppets on a string. None of them wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Well, what did your blog say? What did you... I'm still lost, but why we should care about this?
Because the mall is pretty. It would be a nice addition to the city. And why should we have some unknown entity saying, oh, no, we need to spend all our money on stadiums, and get away with this with, even with no public debate? I mean, we're living at the plutocracy. Some, hidden government upstairs is making these decisions, and it's got the tentacles and everything. It would be like the Lincoln Memorial getting blocked by a baseball stadium, and there's no controversy. Where are all the Freemasons holding up their great compass and square and, being known to be involved with D.C. planning? What I've seen down there, those people are a bunch of drones. They join these organizations, they get 20 swords pointed at them with a burlap bag over their head. That's basically telling them, you shut up, you be a quiet, good yes man, and we'll give you an overpriced job for being a mediocre putz. That's what a good old boy is, and that's the dynamics.
All right, I know that this ceremony you're talking about is at the higher, that's already at the 30th degree. Up until then, most lower degree Masons don't know about their organization at all.
Right, it's highly segmented.
Right. Now, I'm going to go back, and believe me, I lost that point. It just doesn't get me angry that there was no rebellion against an extension of a path. I just don't understand, with world wars and 80 million people being butchered, and your claim is that these wars were manipulated by the Catholic Church. And I think that's a more important issue than this one.
Oh yes, but the thing is that the tree's got many branches, big ones and little ones, and a little one can be useful for highlighting their occult government.
Look, if you
want
to
talk... It's more important than World War II, but it's a valuable way of highlighting, why is it that they always claim to be so much into city planning, but then all of a sudden everyone's got their heads in the sands and doesn't want to talk.
Look, if you want to talk really solid proof that the Catholics had a very, very dirty finger in World War II, you take the post-war and you take the rat lines where monasteries, including Jesuits, they were also Franciscan and Dominican. They got the Nazis. They saved the Nazis. They put them up and they gave them false papers and they put them on boats and planes and they sent them worldwide and they kept.
And that's totally covered up. I mean, you go on the internet, type in Vatican claims. There's a lawsuit going on. I don't find anything in the news about that. I mean, these people have a website about the lawsuit, but I have not seen any media coverage except for what's mentioned in my blog and a handful of others.
Who's suing who?
Pardon?
Who's suing who?
They were suing Croatia or the Vatican. The Vatican claims. I have it on my website.
Well, you got to expand on this a little more. Who drew up the suit, and what are the claims, and what are they suing about?
From people, from Jewish people and other people. Here it is, right here. In late '07, it was sidestepped by a judge who granted a motion to dismiss.
You mean it's dismissed? It doesn't exist anymore.
Maybe not. It's the Vatican Bank claims. Greg Szymanski's written on it.
Well, if it's dismissed, it's stopped being relevant.
Not as relevant. I'm looking at their site right now. Motion for reconsideration, February 22, 2010. They're waiting on that.
Well, first of all, let's get back to the original question.
Okay.
What are they? Who is suing, and what were they trying to get?
They were trying to get monetary compensation. It's called Alperin versus Vatican. Statement of the Independent Council of Roma of Serbia on the Vatican Bank lawsuit for immediate release. Alperin versus Vatican Bank has given hope to the Roma people of Serbia that the injustices of the Second World War might finally be addressed. But
so it's the gypsies who are suing.
Okay. But the U.S. Ninth Circuit Appellate Court decision on December 30, 2010, granting immunity to the Vatican for war crimes is a great disappointment. The U.S. courts can no longer be considered hospitable to human rights cases. The Vatican Bank has been granted immunity to commit crimes. There can be no immunity from complicity in genocide. By laundering the gold teeth of our relatives, the Vatican Bank, joining with the Utasha butchers and madmen who terrorized Yugoslavia during the Second World War, killing, raping, and looting with impunity. Now the U.S. court system has seemingly absolved these killers of any guilt through its actions. There is irrefutable evidence in the form of statements of the witnesses, authenticated historical documents, and transcripts that our lawyer, Dr. Jonathan Levy, and others have submitted.
Oh, I know John Levy. He's on my email list.
Okay, good.
He sends me stuff all the time.
Okay, let me just finish this statement here. It's not much longer. The Vatican Bank is not a religious institution, but is in fact well known throughout the world for money laundering. It stands for illegal profiteering and not religion. The U.S. courts have set back the cause of human rights to the dark days of the Second World War through its stated indifference to our plight. The U.S. courts remind us of Pope Pius XII, who, while feigning holiness, encouraged the Nazis and Utasha to commit genocide due to his inaction. Today, the vaults of the Vatican Bank still gleam with our ancestors' golds. This money-stained gold was bought dearly with the lives of our kin and is now retained, ironically, with the help of the courts of the so-called former champion of liberty of the United States. Because of all these facts, Independent Council of Roma of Serbia urges the U.S. State Court of Appeals for the Ninth District to immediately revoke the unjust decision in the interest of justice. This shameful ruling is anti-Gypsy, anti-Roma. Further, it tarnishes the reputation of the U.S. courts internationally. The message of the U.S. courts is unmistakable. The lives of Roma are worthless in their eyes when compared to the golden allure of the Vatican. The message to neo-Nazis, fascists, and racists everywhere is clear as well as it's okay to kill and rob Roma as long as you make an illegal argument for immunity.
Well, first of all, you gave me a great idea. I'm going to email John, put him on the show coming up. Now, when you say Roma, that's the name the gypsies call themselves. Is this... Did I hear this wrong? What is the Roma in this document?
The Roma, they were amongst the people butchered by the
All right, that's the gypsies. I have to look at this document. I know John Levy, and I'm glad you brought him up, and I'll get him to explain it on the show. He's been reading me for years. Now, let's go backwards. Well, what we've got an outline that the Vatican, certainly in the Second World War, they gave away their Nazi leanings at the end of the war when they snuck them worldwide. And by the way, they snuck them into the States. Mostly they went to South America, a lot went to Australia, but thousands of them came to America as well. And that required help from the American government.
Well, we just, like my last article on continuing counter-reformation is one now in Kentucky. A woman who committed war crimes in the 1990s.
Oh, I read that. But that's from the recent Serbian war.
Yeah, I understand, but that's it's connected. It's the same part of the world.
Kind of. There's kind of a gap in time here, like 50 years.
Yeah, but if we had a bunch of Germans doing that today, we would rightfully say, oh, yeah, that's an outshoot of the Third Reich. This is an outshoot of the Utasha regime. What this woman did was not eye for an eye.
No, but again, to describe it, well, the article...
One case was that she said where she cut the penis off of the guy who raped, killed a Croatian girl. But the others were not eye for eye. They were just, forcing a guy to drink gasoline. What did he do to deserve that? I mean, they don't, it's in the article.
Yeah, I read the article. Look, there was a really, compared to the butchery that went on in the former Yugoslavia, she was a very small cog in it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And, all right, she gets sent back and she's put on trial. And, the man who was de-penis isn't there to testify against her. But I really doubt that he was necessarily a rapist. I think she probably just got off on cutting off his penis.
Maybe, I'm just telling you that was the only one where it was presented as eye for an eye, and the rest, they didn't even make an attempt. Yeah,
there is no question, but the difference, and it's a big difference I want you to know, is that 50,000 active Nazis, actually, the final number who came to the States was over 100,000. A lot moved to Cleveland. Go figure that out.
Huh.
But
it blended in well. Everyone there looks Irish or German or Polish. Just about.
In Cleveland?
Well, Ohio, anyway.
Well, they moved here. An awful lot of Nazis were funneled through these monasteries, and the phony papers were accepted by the Americans, and there's a major scandal that's never been properly looked into, is the hundreds of thousands of Nazis who escaped Germany, never faced prosecution, changed their names, and started new lives worldwide. That was via the Catholic Church.
Yeah, and they could blend in very well. I mean, also, too, the topography, a lot of, like, Ohio, it looks like northern Germany or Poland. Well,
I think they probably had a German population there first, and they just, it was just like old home week. But nonetheless, the point I'm making is, while you're talking about Catholic involvement in these world wars, this is actual proof that they really were allied with the Nazis. Needless to say, Pope Pius VI, who was the Pope during the Holocaust, and which the Vatican want to canonize. They want to canonize Pope
Pius the 12th.
The 12th, I'm sorry. Wait, is it Benedict VI?
This is, I think, Benedict the 12th or 15th.
They're both the 12th.
No, maybe the 16th. I think it's...
Yeah, it's the 16th.
Yeah.
Whatever, Pope Pius XII was no saint, and the Vatican and their Nazi Pope, the Pope Benedict XVI, they're doing it like creeping artillery. First, they're going to beatify John Paul II. They're going to pull his body out of the ground and make him somehow pleasing to the public and who will walk by and say nice things to him. That's being done right now. But the real goal is to canonize Pope Pius, who, look, all he had to do was open his mouth and say that the crimes against the Jews are against the Roman Catholic Church, and Germany would have lost an awful lot of soldiers, and the Holocaust wouldn't have continued in the same way. He never made a statement like that. That's at a minimum.
Yeah.
At a maximum, well, he died in 47, and the ratlines were already... Pardon me?
Pius XII died in 1958.
Oh, then he was all ratlines. He was the one who organized the saving of the Nazis.
And when he died, they said his body put out a stench, like they were amazed at how bad his body smelled. That's another one of those little factoids I picked up. Another factoid, just to bookmark it right now, the black pope that succeeded Ledolchowski, Jansen's, he was in from 1946 to 1964. I recall reading that he died of a brain hemorrhage, and they've deleted that from the internet. I can't find it anymore.
Oh, I'm not sure the significance of dying of a brain hemorrhage.
Well, I'm thinking of God trying to tell us something. It's just an idea, a theory I have. Okay, would you have to go back to the black pope that goes two black popes before Ledolchowski? Okay, I said there was Ledolchowski. Then you had Franz Werns, the German. Well, immediately before you had Franz Werns, you had the Spanish guy, Luis Martin. And this is the guy, okay, his death was amazing. He had the worst case of cancer I've ever heard of in any human being. His body was ravished with it. They had to amputate his right arm in like 1905. And
well, they didn't really have much treatment in 1905 for cancer.
I understand, but I mean, I'm reading these histories of the black popes, and only one or two pops up ever getting cancer, and this is the guy that gave us the cigarette mercantilism, the so-called drug war, to protect cigarettes against coca leaf. Coca leaf is non-carcinogenic. Cigarettes are highly carcinogenic. I see it as divine justice. And with the whole theory about the hemorrhage, I'd love to see what part of his brain blew out, because if it was the right front part of his brain, that would be like God saying, yeah, we did JFK.
Well, I'm going to repeat what you said before you dived into this, that this, of course, is a theory.
Yeah,
and you
exactly.
Admit to
just a bunch of coincidences and stuff. And
well, they're kind of interest, but I'm going to dive in. We very shortly will have a little break, and I'm going to dive in for the next hour on a few things that I know about.
Okay.
And that includes Israel's got a first-class Vatican spy in the house of the president. President Shimon Peres is nothing but a spy for the Vatican. And in the next hour, I'm going to add a few comments that back you up. Hi, it's Barry Chamish again. We're back for the final hour. We've got a good guest in Douglas Willinger. I am going to begin this hour with a plug. I've got a book that I think Douglas should also read. It's called Shabtai Tzvi, Labor Zionism, and the Holocaust. And it covers an awful lot of these subjects. And it covers the issue of Sabbateanism, which goes hand in hand with the Illuminati. And it's a subject that Douglas, you got to get this book, all right?
Okay.
But for all my listeners, go to www.lulu.com. You write in my name, that's CHAMISH. That'll get you to my books. Get the less expensive non-color version of Shabtai Tzvi, Labor Zionism, and the Holocaust. You can download it for like $5. And my website is barrychamish.com. Douglas, shall we continue?
Yes.
Now, about... Boy, I don't know if I want to dive into this yet, but Paris offered the Vatican... This was way back in 1992 when peace, so-called peace, broke out with the Oslo negotiations. Paris was left out of them. So he found out about it. He was the foreign minister. He turned to the Vatican. He sent someone named Marek Halter, to the Pope with a note offering East Jerusalem to the Vatican. Hegemony, not just any old status, hegemony over East Jerusalem and all the holy sites. And the Vatican, they took the offer. The deal was that they were going to create a Palestinian capital in this entity. Are you aware of this?
Just what I've read on Hive Mind. I think I got some of your email on it.
Yeah, well, this is not insignificant.
No, it's not at all. It sounds like a new Vatican state, a crusader state. Palestine, after all, is the name given to Israel by the Roman Empire.
You know, when Paris became president, the first time he opened his mouth, practically, he wanted to give the Vatican sovereignty over 42 sites in Israel. Sovereignty.
Does it have to, give it a name? Wouldn't it be called, the Holy Roman East?
Well, each little site would be it would be a monastery or a church or whatever the Vatican built before there was Israel. It goes back to them, and not just goes back. They have sovereignty. It's like being in the Vatican.
Like an embassy. It's a piece of sovereign territory.
Yeah. Close. Better then. All right. If there's trouble at an embassy, if there's a fire or something, you can send fire trucks. This is like a complete sovereignty. They want nothing to do with the state on any level.
I remember I was in Israel in 1985 with my family, and I recall that there was already a degree of Catholic Church rulership over Catholic churches at that time. Obviously, it wasn't sovereign.
I don't think... Well, look, under the table, they don't pay taxes, and the Israeli government are chasing them. They owe billions in back taxes under the table, but on paper, they're in Israel, and they're supposed to obey the law of the country.
Right.
Paris wants them not...
The laws are never applied equally.
Pardon me?
The laws are not applied equally.
Well, let's put it this way. If Paris gets his way, they don't have to follow the law.
Well, they could also stretch it, too. I'm thinking of places in Florida where the Catholic Church doesn't have to pay property on their property. And we're not talking churches or monasteries. We're talking like real estate developments. No property tax.
I think all churches, I think it's beyond Catholicism.
Yes.
All right, again, I'm trying to urge you on. Look, I don't know if you know about King Juan Carlos and the peace breaking out in the Middle East, which is now just utter chaos.
I haven't followed Juan Carlos as much as you have. I've been more into the whole dynamics of the U.S. foreign policy run out of Jesuit Georgetown University, whole Edmund Walsh School of Foreign Service. Like, it's an Kulturkampf revenge, and it ties right into what you were talking about with the rat lines, the great cover-up. I was wondering if you knew this. I was told that during the Eichmann trial in 1961, that Eichmann made references to the popes, plural, referring to Pacelli, Pius XII, and Ledolchowski. I was wondering if you knew anything about that.
Well, he was in the public didn't hear. He was in a soundproof box. They made darn sure that whatever he said wasn't heard by anyone.
Right. I'd love to have a tap on what was really said, more so.
Well, again, Eichmann is a different story. What Eichmann did in Hungary, the Jews wanted to cut a deal. He did not want to kill anymore. He wanted to save 800,000 Hungarian Jews. They sent someone named Rudolf Kastner over to Hungary. He dressed up like a Nazi, took back 3,500 friends, family, and fellow Sabbateans, and just told Eichmann to kill the rest.
Right. I see, like a select few. Sabbateans, I would also say, Masonic, whatever, suck-up types. But, the favored class, so to speak.
Well, I'd say it's more than a favored class. We go all the way back to Frankfurt, Germany, when the Sabbateans declared war on the Jews. Look, in their theology, everything in the Bible is correct in its opposite sense. I always use this example: do not murder becomes do murder. And the Holocaust, the real story of the Holocaust is not what people understand. Now, the only three people Israel only convicted one Nazi.
Eichmann was the only one.
The only one.
Wow.
Israel did not prosecute Nazis. They cut a deal not to prosecute Nazis. The only one was Eichmann. Rudolf Kastner was murdered in his bed by the hospital bed by the Israeli Secret Service, and someone. Oh my goodness!
Right, more revenge than finding out that what was behind it.
Well, there was. Oh my goodness!
That's the dynamics. If they don't want to find out, they just okay, let's satisfy some lust for revenge, but not allow the whole truth to come out. That's the dynamics.
Well, that's certainly the dynamics.
Yeah.
Wallenberg. Raoul Wallenberg was a Swedish diplomat who was fighting the Sabbateans, and, he just disappeared. The rumor was the Russians got him. Everyone who knew the inside story of the murder of 800,000 Jews trapped in Hungary died, and Eichmann was amongst them.
Oh, you're saying Eichmann was killed at the end of World War II?
No, he was killed by the Israelis in 1961.
Okay. All right, okay, it wasn't a double. I thought you said Eichmann was killed with Wallenberg.
Well, it's certain. Wallenberg disappeared in 1945.
Right, exactly. He disappeared sometime in the 1940s.
Kastner was killed in, I believe it was 1953, 1954. There was a trial against him. The whole thing came out in Israel.
Kastner?
He was the Jew sent by the Israelis to Hungary to negotiate for the Jews and took away 3,500 of them.
Okay.
They all died. They were all murdered. The story has not been told, but it's so deeply ugly. That's why I say you really have to get my book, Shabtai Tzvi, Labor Zionism and the Holocaust. I tell the story.
I'll download it tonight. Have you read the Avles Beluskas blogs, by any chance?
They're sent to me. He sends them.
Okay. Good. Yeah, because he talks a lot about, at the end of World War II, the similar dynamics where they massacred a lot of Yad Pasha, etc., to cover it up, as opposed to having show trials, in public.
Well, that's certainly the Israeli way. There were no trials. The only trial of a Nazi who was actually convicted was Eichmann, and he was in a box where nobody heard him talk.
Correct.
They brought him to Israel and made sure that not a word leaked out to the public. The business of Hungary is a major Israeli secret. The Israelis they can't acknowledge their own recent history. They can't do it. It's beyond them to even try.
Right, because I was just reading some of your email. You were talking about, I have one piece of email here from you recently, the Levin affair.
I didn't, oh no, I sent that. It's not, yes, I have a paid news service. Mm-hmm. The Levin affair was in the 50s, and it was, someone sent me a précis, and I sent it to you because I thought you'd see it was quite interesting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think Israel has a Masonic government that gives it bad advice.
Oh, I think we should now talk about the Supreme Court in Jerusalem.
Yeah, continue, please.
No, I'm not continuing. You're continuing.
Yeah, well, like I said, with my thing about Washington, D.C. planning, I'm into infrastructure, road, building type of issues. I mean, that's what disappoints me about Freemasonry. They hold up the compass and square. You think they'd be like pro-public infrastructure, and they're anything but.
Well, let's talk about the Supreme Court
building. Exactly, okay. Go on.
No, you go on.
Well, you know more about the Supreme Court building than I do. I mean, I could pull some pictures up on the internet and look at it.
Oh, boy. I was hoping you would... Well, the Supreme Court building in Jerusalem, Ben-Gurion told Look magazine that world justice would be decided someday in Jerusalem in the Hall of Justice in the Supreme Court building. In short, this isn't even non-blatant Freemasonry. You've got 30 steps leading up to illumination, and then 3 more steps, and you've got the obelisk. You've, of course, on the roof, you've got the pyramid in the eye.
Right. Yeah, it's totally blatant. It's just like with Canberra, Australia, too. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but it's like blasphemy from above.
What is in Canberra?
The Capitol building. You have to just Google it and take a look at it. It'll blow your mind. Troy sent it to me.
Well, what is it?
It's the Capitol building of Canberra. It's a totally Masonic building.
Well,
the principles.
Frankly, they all are.
Yeah.
You can take the Capitol building of Manitoba, and it was built along Masonic lines. That's everywhere.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court building in Jerusalem, let's put it this way, some buildings you have to squeeze the secrets out. This one is just...
Yeah. I understand the difference what you're getting at. It's not something subtle. You know, it has to be pointed out.
It's a caricature.
You know, like points on the building corresponding to some star chart or something like in D.C. No, it's totally, hidden in plain sight.
Well, somehow you've got the Freemasons and the Jesuits lined up, and in fact, it's true that what Adam Weishaupt founded, the Illuminati, did worm their way into British Freemasonry after they were thrown out of every country in continental Europe, and they did. Well, they got chapters worldwide. That's how they got their influence.
Exactly. I mean, I've been across this great land of ours, and I've met people in small little towns, South Dakota, whatever, and it's like, oh yeah, my grandfather was a Mason, and they tell me about how they were like in a Mason building, and they got to some third floor where it was all covered in dark purple velvet, and they had like it looked like a judicial chamber of sorts. It was really spooky looking. They called it like Satan's courts. That's the way they described it. Well,
as I say, the Masons were once a very very strong organization in America. Their numbers have fallen. They don't seem to have captured the imagination of the youth today.
Well, I mean, I've witnessed certain dynamics in city planning that is not very flattering for these people. Alexandria, Virginia. Go into my profile, go to the blog A Trip Within the Beltway, and hit the tag Alexandria Orb. It was about the reconstruction of the Capitol Beltway outside of Washington, D.C., where it passed through Alexandria. They were going to, in a nutshell, they were going to cover like 1,000 feet of the highway, make it into a park. So it would be nice and quiet and everything. I made a proposal, make a giant traffic circle next to it, make it 3,000 feet long. They went in reverse. They shortened the urban deck from 1,000 feet to 200 feet, putting the oldest African-American cemetery in Alexandria right next to 14 lanes of freeway and freeway ramps instead of a tunneled freeway, which should be a quiet park. And I was following this bridge planning thing for like 8 years. There was no political push from anywhere to take away the environmental mitigation for the people living next to the highway. But all of a sudden it popped out of the blue, and the city council would issue a report saying that the relevant committee on the issue, called a stakeholder participation panel, that they didn't even vote on it. And that was a total lie. They did vote on it. They voted 8-1 against shortening the urban deck. But the city government of Alexandria would lie through its teeth, and they would all behave like drones. And this is in the shadow of the tallest Masonic structure in the state of Virginia today, the Masonic Tower, the George Washington National Monument. Not the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., but the lighthouse-looking one over Alexandria. And it just left a very bad taste in my mouth about Freemasonry. And they would be very much against covering a freeway because the unbuilt segment of I-95 through D.C., which was not built, because it basically, to make a long story short, the best route goes through a Masonic property. And they just don't want that.
Well, it was built somewhere.
Yeah, they built the Beltway instead, which they had to widen because they didn't build 95 through D.C. And they needed to do this environmental mitigation. And I happen to be the one person calling for building 95 through D.C., which is what John F. Kennedy proposed the year before his assassination. He said it should follow the B&O railroad tracks because that's the least, that's the least objectionable way of building the freeway. You have industrial right-of-way next to an existing loud railroad. And the best thing is to put it into a giant tunnel and put a park on top. That's my idea. But with Kennedy, what happened is they had the first freeway study on this right around the time of his assassination. The study started in late 1963. It came out in October 64, and it didn't follow his prescription to follow the railroad. Instead, it had 37 routes all over the map, creating a firestorm of controversy, because those 37 proposed freeway routes were an abomination.
Well, the I-95 does, it goes from Maine to Florida. It must pass through there somewhere.
It's got gaps in Boston, western New Jersey, and Washington, D.C. However, the number gap is only in the New Jersey area. In Boston and D.C., they just signed it onto the Beltway. But they didn't construct the through-city route, and it's caused massive traffic problems. And the highway could have been built and could still be built with hardly displacing anybody. And you're doing it with tunnels, of course, so it's quiet to live next to. But the thing is, the biggest property owner along that railroad is Catholic University of North America. And I've been there. I gave a history presentation on it in 2005 for the D.C. Historical Society of Northeast, and I was in a room full of Jesuit priests, and I picked up their sentiments. They weren't, against the freeway because it was going to wreck their neighborhood. No, it was going to go through industrial areas. Instead, they just didn't want it anywhere near them.
Well, how do you figure that so many Jesuits, this is now child molestation, it just came out this month, they're paying billions to their victims in America. The numbers are apparently in the tens of thousands.
There's according to the former, advisor to the governor of New York, this was in the New York Times about 3 years ago, he said that 70% of the Jesuits were homosexual.
That's about their only outlet other than their students.
Right.
barring the every Catholic's fantasy of raping a nun. It's easier just to molest the kiddies.
Well, that's what they're into, and what's disgusting is they just should have put them in monasteries so they could just do adults. Instead, they put them into other communities, other parishes, to be with other people's children. That's reckless endangerment.
Yeah, I think we can actually talk about Jesuits thrown out of countries. Japan threw them out, for instance. Mostly, partly because of political chicanery, but in greater part because they were abusing their children.
Well, also, too, no birth control and the attitude of a woman should basically have to get pregnant every time she has the pleasure of sex.
These were boy children.
Pardon?
These were not children who were going to be pregnant. These were boys.
Right, but that attitude will also produce families with 10, 15 children, as opposed to 4 or 5 children.
I'm lost there.
I'm just thinking that in an overpopulation situation, you might have more of a likelihood of those occurrences.
All right. I think the point is actually more of moral corruption than overpopulation. But what the heck?
Well, I mean, the Catholic Church is definitely total moral perversity. The whole attitude is that it's extremely hierarchical, and the Pope is just viewed as, God on earth and can't be questioned, and that's that.
Well, the fact is, Catholics today are running from the Church. The least church-going peoples certainly in Southern Europe, are Catholics. In France and Italy,
hated. For instance, when the Third Reich invaded Poland, they made a point of killing the educated Polish people, whether or not they were Jewish even. I mean, if they were just, Polish Catholic, not part Jewish or anything, they kill them first because they wanted to dumb down the Polish population. Kaiser Reich didn't do that, but the Third Reich did. And that was consistent with Vladimir Lodowski's hatred of liberal Catholics.
All right. By the way, that fact, of course, is right. They've got graveyards with like 20,000 scholars piled on top of each other in Poland. Now, again, it was the Nazis who did this. You wipe out the creative minds and you get less opposition later on.
Exactly. Another thing was putting fluoride in the water. And also
fluoride? Did they have problems with cavities?
In 1944, when the German Nazis were retreating, they made a point of destroying the archive.
Hold on 1 second. We have got a 3-minute break. Don't hang up. We will go on. Well, I'm going to be more general for the last 22 minutes. So this is Barry Chamish. Next week's guest, and I hope he can make it, we have got, oh my goodness, Patrick. Oops, I blew it. I blew next week. Well, no, I didn't. Patrick Murphy, with a little luck, will be on next week. And we'll be back in 3 minutes for the final segment. Hi, it's Barry Chamish for a final segment. We've got a nice guest this week, Douglas Willinger, and we're going to tell you how to get his website. 1 second before I do so, I'm going to plug me. To get my books, there's about 10 of them. You go to lulu.com. That's www.lulu.com. You'll see a search box right in my name. CHAMISH. That will take you to my books. You can download them, like $5-7, or get one sent to your house, however you prefer. My website is barrychamish.com, and I'm going to leave something unique tonight. If you want my DVDs or you want me to speak to your group, my number is 904-315-8079. That's 904-315-8079. 8079. Douglas, do you want to give people your site?
Yeah, Continuing Counter Reformation.blogspot.com.
Do it one more time. It's a long one.
Continuing Counter Reformation.blogspot.com.
All righty. Let's. I'm not sure what you know about the next subject, but it's become of interest to me, and that is the Mediterranean Union.
I've never heard of it, please.
Oh, my goodness.
Mediterranean, I've never heard that phrase.
The MU has been trying to, well, right now there are 5 nations, Catholic nations in Europe and 5 Arab nations, but they're starting with 10, but what they're trying is to get the Mediterranean, all the nations touching the Mediterranean to join this union, which was founded, of course, by King Juan Carlos and Javier Solana, the foreign minister of Spain. You're not aware of this?
Well, I'm aware of the concept of a revived Roman Empire, which is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, but this is a revived Roman Empire, that's for sure, but it's also very, very active. It's only like how many years old? They just built their island headquarters on Malta a year ago. They've only been around 5-6 years, but they're trying to change the political dynamics of the whole area.
A thought about that: Malta would be an excellent place to help run whatever's happening in Libya right now.
You want to talk about the Knights of Malta?
Maybe you should talk about them.
No.
I mean, I know something about them, but I think maybe you know more about them.
No, I'm the host. We don't do that.
I mean, it's another, Roman Catholic military order. They hide behind the word hospital, but I guess when you have a military operation, you're going to need a lot of hospitals.
No, you said that Malta was significant for Libya, other than being the closest airport.
Right between Italy and Libya. So I would, logically think that with what's happening in Libya right now, with this, they've engineered, there's a war being engineered in Libya right now. This does not just happen spontaneously. The good people all decide they're going to take out the bad leader. It's obviously more complicated than what you're going to hear on the TV. And I'm just thinking that Malta, the island of Malta, is like right between Italy and Libya. That's just a thought I had.
No more than that? I mean, when it comes
to... It's a thought to build on.
Well, when it comes to Libya, even the stuff I've been getting lately, certainly Gaddafi is being... his regime is really being preserved by mercenaries, black mercenaries from Africa, hired by an Israeli, General Yisrael Ziv, for $5 billion. Gaddafi, instead of falling a month ago, preserved his kingdom, or whatever he calls it, with a deal. He cut a deal with Israel. On the other hand, the rebels are being backed by NATO. Libya is a war, if in fact this is the right interpretation, it's a war between Libyans fighting either for NATO or for Israel.
What's the point of Israel supporting a Gaddafi? Just because they think that that's going to prevent something worse from coming in?
Well, that's the justification. First of all, there was $5 billion. The reports I've been getting say that Gaddafi paid $5 billion for tens of thousands of mercenaries. Remember, when this started a month ago, he had only like 4,000 in his country, and overnight he had 30,000 of these mercenaries. Apparently, the deal was General, again, Yisrael Ziv, had cut a deal with Libyan intelligence to save Gaddafi, who was on the precipice of ruin. They passed over $5 billion and a few other juicy promises, and that mercenary army has kept Gaddafi alive.
I wonder about, on the change of topic slightly, what's going to happen in Egypt. Is there going to be any real reform, or is it just...
Of course not.
Yeah, it's going to be more the same.
Well, if I had to predict, I would say that the army will find excuses to stay in power forever. That would be my prediction.
I agree. If there's how long Mubarak was in.
Pardon me?
Mubarak was in for just under 30 years.
Along those lines, until the next revolution. Look what you've got. If there's a fair election, the Muslim Brotherhood will win if there's a fair election.
Right. I've heard those similar fears about Algeria in the past.
Algeria doesn't have a peace treaty with Israel.
Okay.
Now, let's go on to your subject. I'm mouthing off about things I know, and we're here to listen to what you know.
Well, okay, with the whole Ledolchowski thing, and it continues through our government with the whole behavior in the 1990s with the breakup of Yugoslavia, which I'm concerned
all right, let's talk about that war, where clearly Croatia had the backing. Well, Germany was the first country to recognize Croatia.
Yes, as well as Slovenia. And then, of course, well, the thing that blows my mind is everyone, all these crocodile tear types for Palestine type, they never talk about Operation Storm. If they're against the expulsion of people from their homeland, well, we did it in 1995, the U.S., jamming the Serbian and the Republic of Krajina's military communications so Croatia could come in and chop the place up.
Now, you do understand that the air attacks on Serbia came from Italy. I mean, you understand this.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. You mean, like I was saying about Malta?
Well, again, without the Knights of Malta, without a proper explanation, it wasn't really a good explanation.
I would just love to have military intelligence surveillance capabilities, and if that could be focused on Malta, the island of Malta, I suspect it would prove to be interesting. Just a hunch.
No, there's way more than a hunch behind that.
I'm being conservative.
You don't have to be conservative with me. I'm easy.
Okay.
So, in other words, you really have not studied the Knights of Malta.
Not that much. And there's an excellent blog out of, I think his name is Phil Yonkers. He's from the Netherlands. And he put out a beautiful bunch of posts, like in September of 2008, but nothing since. And the last one on there is about the head of Major League Baseball, like back in the 1970s. And I'm
thinking more like Alexander Haig and the Foreign Service of the United States.
I'm saying that when you click onto the blog homepage, that's the one that pops up because it's the final post he did.
The Knights of Malta.
It's a fascinating blog, and I recommend you go through it. I view the Knights of Malta as part of the same, basically continuing Roman Empire hierarchical structure.
To be kind, at the top of the Knights of Malta are an awful lot of American politicians, people in charge of state and defense have been Knights of Malta for...
Yes, as well as public health. Harvey Wiley of the USDA, the chief chemist who chose to protect tobacco against the market threat of coca. I came across a letter written to him in December 1908 in the Archives 2 outside of Washington, D.C., next to the power line right-of-way outside of D.C., Archives 2, and this letter is inviting him to a smoker at the Cosmos Club, and there are these references in there. We want you to be there because we want all of the great knights who have shown like great prowess on former occasions. We're referring to these people who are a part of this as knights. But it doesn't say knights of what. But to me, that's a red flag that the man, Harvey Wiley, was a member of some Roman Catholic military order of some type. Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, I don't know. Knights. It's right in the letter, and I could even give you the link showing you the actual letter.
Let's just...
as an example.
Well, I got an example for you.
Okay.
The U.S. Supreme Court, there are no Protestants on it at all. Not a one.
Right.
There are 3 Jews, the rest are Catholics.
Right.
You're not going to comment on that?
Well, the problem is that the Protestants we've had on there have been totally rotted out, I don't know, like Southern Baptist Freemason types. It's almost irrelevant. I mean, it's not irrelevant in the broader scale. But
Well,
it's just
determining the laws of the country. I'd say
I don't trust a rotted out Protestant Freemason much more than a Roman Catholic. They're really remarkably the same.
Well, they haven't been on the Supreme Court of the United States for well over a decade.
Who hasn't?
A Protestant.
This just happened recently, with Sotomayor.
Well, that was.
Right, but that was just 2 or 3 years ago. That wasn't.
No, that was less. But that again, that's just Jewish liberal.
Right.
You've got 9 judges who are all Catholic on the board, and look, the odds in favor of that being random are not good.
I know, because Catholics are 35, 40% of the population, not 100%.
I think it's less than 35. Well, actually, with the Latinos coming in, it's certainly becoming a much more Catholic country.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I think Protestants should be more welcoming of Mexicans to convert them away from Catholicism, as opposed to being fearful and everything, because I think that's the way the Jesuits want the others to be.
Well, no, I would look at the issue differently. People have asked, they've asked me even, how is it that the Americans have let in this massive number, probably over 20 million, of legal immigrants from Mexico and not found a solution to stop it. It's really just a show. There's very little in the way of penalties for sneaking into the States, and you can try again all you want. And my answer is this is the fastest way to Catholicize the country. Add 20 million illegal immigrants, and you with lots of children.
I understand where you're getting at, but I'm thinking of what I see as the mistake Bismarck made. When Bismarck decided that Prussia was going to be strictly more German, he encouraged Polish nationalism in those areas, as opposed to being a more multi-ethnic model for Prussia. It became this is just Prussia-Germany.
How is that related to illegal immigration from Mexico?
Because both the U.S. frontier with Mexico and the German-Polish thing, that's all frontier between Catholicism and Protestantism. And you have to think of it strategically. I don't believe in being anti-Mexican or anti-Polish.
I wouldn't say it's being anti-Mexican.
Exactly. I understand. I'm not accusing you of that at all. I'm just saying that I believe that Protestantism is too fearful, and they let the Catholic, the Jesuits, outmaneuver them all the time, and getting them to behave certain ways to their detriment.
Well,
I
what
would have
you're
more
saying,
Protestant outreach to Mexicans.
What you're saying is the Jesuits are behind the illegal immigration as well?
I believe so. They had McCarrick of Washington, D.C. He's not a Jesuit, but he was like the lead speaker at some big rally on the Mall back in April of 2006 in favor of more Mexican immigration.
Well,
so I see it as a strategic thing where they bring the Mexicans in who are Roman Catholic, okay?
Which is just about all of them.
Yeah, but I believe in countering it not by being fearful of Mexicans, but to welcome them.
Well, by Americans sneaking into Mexico illegally.
Well, that's the whole unfairness of it all. If they want this country to be bilingual, then shouldn't Mexico be bilingual? How come you never hear about them putting up bilingualism in Mexico?
I don't think they have that many English speakers there.
Right. Well, that's because it's got to be driven by the economy. And I think that I would look into the whole concept of Mexico being deliberately mismanaged, so the people want to leave. And where they're going to leave to, most likely the U.S.
Well, that's where they are leaving to in the two tens of millions. I've heard 20 million are here legally right now, permanently in the United States.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, they're everywhere practically.
Well, that would be, if you wanted the ideal plot to Catholicize America, all you have to do is get tens of millions of Mexicans into America. They'll have children, they'll vote, and you will get a 35% Catholic population using that method.
Right, and doing nothing to counter it.
Well, look, you have to understand that the Catholic Church has taken a ton of bad publicity lately. Really nasty.
I think it's a limited hangout, frankly. They let all this stuff come out about the sex stuff, so no one talks about Little Chowsky in World War II.
I don't know if they're connected. I think a very small number of people are historians.
Right.
But nonetheless, if you want a thriving church, you can't have a bunch of sex perverts in every city where they show up.
Right. Well, I'd say just a certain percentage of the population is that, and they're going to be naturally gravitated to a place, like that.
Well, yeah, if you're banned from having legal sex,
right.
you're gonna go looking where it's available.
Exactly. That's why, I think that the Protestants who support, a lot of what laws that see what people do in the privacy of their own bedrooms is misguided.
Look, the one difference, now admittedly, outside of America's unusual. There are religious movements here everywhere you look. But in Europe, it's just dead. And the Protestant, in England, the churches are all boarded up. I mean, literally, hardly anyone goes to church. But you don't have these creepy crimes of perversion because their ministers can marry.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's where Protestantism and Judaism has got it way over Catholicism.
Well, that's pretty, that's...
In that regard, yeah. I mean, I've seen, different things about the different religions that I can pick and choose, and most one of the things where Protestantism and Judaism is way better, superior to Roman Catholicism.
Look, there isn't a big phenomenon like in Catholicism in the Jewish theological circles of molesting children. Here and there you'll hear about it. But
yeah, because it's in the human species.
It's in the human species that's very, very repressed. And if you can't marry your entire life, something is going to pop inside of you.
Exactly. I agree with that totally. What do they think? I mean, your body produces, and it's got to be released.
Well, you release it on your 7-year-old students.
Ridiculous.
Little Tommy and little Billy.
It's designed to create problems. Doesn't the Book of Corinthians talk about how the God of this earth is Satan? That's why we have all these absurdities.
I don't know the Book of Corinthians.
Right, I don't know. I'm just what I've picked up off of email lists, so to speak. But to me, I buy that. That makes sense.
What do you know about Opus Dei, DI?
It was formed in 1923. Little Chowsky said, "Oh, it's evil," and but it was formed under his watch. I wouldn't trust it.
Well, no, you have to. You've got to detail. Nobody knows what Opus Dei is. Fill them in.
It's an ultra-conservative Catholic religious order.
It's more than I'm the host. I can't. It's more than an order. It's once again. John Kerry, who, by the way, his father is Jewish.
I know he's Skull and Bones.
He wasn't Opus Dei?
No, I'd never heard that one. I know he's Skull and Bones.
I'm not going to stand by that. I'm going to say I was mistaken.
Right. Quoted or misunderstood. I understand.
But the
I don't
Opus
have any
Dei,
proof of him being Opus Dei either.
it's not an unpowerful organization. You can't enlighten us at all on Opus Dei?
I haven't studied it that much. I mean, I've basically built a study on things that I feel are grossly underdeveloped, such as Vladimir Ledolchowski's Kulturkampf Revenge. I mean, like Tupper Southsea mentions about Ledolchowski as being, this is like one of the most underrated, people of the 20th century, words to those effect. But he didn't, build it as far as I did, but I incorporated his work because I thought his work was first rate. It's not complete, but it's there. What, a 15 Brenner Strauss? I don't think Brenner Strauss was in the book he wrote, Rulers of Evil. It's a separate essay that was on the internet, and I've incorporated it in my first month archives of a continuing Counter-Reformation.
Well, again, expand on that a little bit.
Whatchamacallit there? Okay, with what, Ledolchowski and Brenner Strauss? It was basically 1919, the story of Brenner Strauss that's the address. 15 Brenner Strauss is where the papal nuncery or papal, some sort of like an embassy building for the Catholic Church was in Bulgaria, and that the young Adolf Hitler was sent to where Pacelli was living, and was met by the Popicina. They wrote a book about her. She was the aide to Pacelli, and she remembered his name, Adolf Hitler, 1919. He came there. We woke up Pacelli and gave him some money and his best wishes.
Did he make an impression on her?
Yes, she remembered the name.
Well, besides that.
They don't say, I'm sure there's more that she might have observed and it's not necessarily written down. I'm only going by what's contained in the article.
So what you're saying is that Hitler got money from the Jesuits?
Yeah, from Pacelli. I don't think Pacelli's a Jesuit per se, but from the Vatican. According to Tupper Southsea, Pacelli idolized Vladimir Ledolchowski.
Tupper Southsea, I want to plug him. Not only were we good friends over email, I bought his albums. He was a tremendous musician. If you know what the Neon Philharmonic is, that's Tupper Southsea.
Yeah, I sent him an email a long time ago, and he died a few weeks later. I never heard back from him, but
very
that's when
talented.
I contacted him.
He wrote an excellent book on the Jesuits, as a matter of fact. Southsea is S-A-U.
Rulers of Evil, you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, I have it. It's a great book.
Tupper Southsea should not go forgotten. It's S-A-U... S-S-Y.
I'm looking at what I have.
S-A-U-C-Y.
Hold on.
I think it's S-A-U-C-Y.
Scrolling down to S-A-U-S-S-Y.
Really? S-A-U-S-S-Y. Look him up. Tupper Southsea. And by the way, if you remember the big hit Morning Girl, he wrote it, and that was his band, the Neon Philharmonic. Now, we've got to say goodbye now. We had an interesting show.
I have a lot on Southsea on Continuing Counter-Reformation. You can go to the right and hit the tag on it.
There you go. Now, we had a good show with Douglas Willinger. What am I saying? Willinger. But Willinger. You lectured me last time about the G, and I want to make sure I had it right. Douglas Willinger gave us a good show. Next week is Patrick Murphy. This has been Barry Chamish, and, well, next Tuesday, 6 p.m., we're on again. That's Eastern Time. Good night, Douglas.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye. Was to challenge the Catholic Church. And one of the things it led to was the imprisonment of this archbishop by Bismarck's government for a nearly 2-year period around 1874, 1875, 1876.
I'm lost. You said 1915 to 1942.
Yes, for his reign as Superior General.
All right.
Born in 1866.
Right.
So this is when he was a child.
Okay.
And I have an account from the Washington Post in 1915 that specifically said that he witnessed the Bismarck's humiliation of his uncle as a child.
All right. Who was his uncle?
His uncle was Mieczysław Ledolchowski, Archbishop of Posen.
All right. That was kind of an important fact.
He passed away in 1902, and he was the head of the prefect of the Congregation of the Propagation of the Faith, or on propaganda, in like the 1890s. And he is the individual that an 1890s article on the New York Times admitted to being a major political influence within the Vatican.
Right. I'm following. I can't comment.
Okay. Anyway, what was interesting about Ledolchowski, the Ledolchowskis is, Vladimir, he was a young boy when this happened. About a year later, his father gets the smallpox from his older sister and dies. So the person taking charge of their upbringing, a male figure, is the uncle, Mieczysław. Mieczysław was obviously a big influence on his nieces and nephews, because only one of them was going to be a nun, but of the two older sisters. But then the other one decided to become a nun too, the one that got the smallpox. Anyway, Vladimir, he got involved with the Jesuit order very early on. Like, he joined it in 1889 when he was, not more like 23 years old. And by 1906, he becomes the Counselor General for the Vatican for like diplomatic affairs throughout Europe, which is what the importance of that is. All of those pre-war alliances that helped set up World War II, like who was allied with who. For instance, it was very significant that they got Great Britain to be allied against Germany rather than with Germany. That was a major defeat for Protestantism, geopolitically.
Right.
One that, in my opinion, shouldn't have happened. But this is a lot more about Ledolchowski, which I haven't even researched yet. But what I find exceptionally fascinating about Vladimir Ledolchowski himself is he becomes the Black Pope in February of 1915. His predecessor was Franz Werns, a German guy. And what's fascinating, and I think this is statistically improbable, except for it being a coup, was that both Franz Werner and Pope Pius X passed away. They died on the same night, August 19, August 20, 1914, hours apart.
And you're saying that's not a coincidence?
Yeah, exactly, okay.
The Jewish cult arose out of it
around
in
the
Poland,
1500s.
And it arose not that far from Posen. I'd say 20 miles. That was the cult of Jacob.
What was the year?
Pardon me?
What was the year of the split, roughly?
Well, the split was official in 1666 when Shabtai Tzvi declared himself the Messiah. This was in Gaza, and half the Jews of the world bought into this. It was not a small...
the timeline is fascinating. It suggests a parallel effort.
Well,
like Freemasonry getting big in Great Britain and starting in the late 1500s?
Well, it gets real big later. The Freemasonry movement, in short, summarizing a difficult thing, the Sultan of Turkey forced him to convert to Islam. He did. Most Jews abandoned him, but not a cult in Turkey called the Dharma. They saw in it a sign that we should all pretend we're Muslims, but really believe in Sabbateanism, in the belief that Shabtai Tzvi is the Messiah. In Europe, around 1750, one Jacob Frank, a little later than that, was a lot closer to the French Revolution, 1770s, one Jacob Frank became the second Messiah of Sabbateanism. He converted thousands of Polish Jews to Catholicism, and they just became spies.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can go on from that. I may as well. Jacob Frank, he became wealthy for a while, using his new Catholics for an intelligence organization, but then went broke. In 17, I believe it was 84 or 5, he went to Frankfurt, Germany, Frankfurt am Main, and
Germany.
Became very wealthy. And the reason for this, for anyone who bothers to understand, Frankfurt was the conspiracy capital of the world. Besides Jacob Frank, also living in Frankfurt at the time was Adam Weishaupt, who was, of course, the founder. Well, you're aware of who Adam Weishaupt was, of course.
Yes. Responsible for that thing on the dollar bill backside to the left.
Well, I think...
I mean, it's ironic. It is back and to the left.
I think founder of the Illuminati is more to the point now. And also living in Frankfurt was Mayor Amschel Rothschild and his 5 sons. There was a meeting where the world conspiracy began in Frankfurt. Rothschild just had a vision that control a country's economy, and you control the country, but he needed spies. He needed a first-class intelligence team to get this thing going. He brought the greatest conspirators in history together. He brought Adam Weishaupt, and he brought Jacob Frank, and, well, they obviously believed in 2 things. Adam Weishaupt believed in destroying the Protestant Reformation. That was what the Illuminati was up to, and Jacob Frank was involved in destroying any Jew who didn't take Shabtai Tzvi as the Messiah. This is when the world of true blue conspiracy really began. Yeah. There was plenty before, but it went into high gear after that, beginning with the French Revolution and so forth.
Going underground, 1774 to 1814. There was a suppression, and that was the same time the United States came into existence.
America was certainly Masonic. But yep. The Masons of 1776 were real decent. What happened is the Illuminati got found out during the French Revolution, and the plans were found. Apparently a horseman fell and died, and in his satchel were the Illuminati plans
You're
for the
French. Freemasonry started out as something good?
Yes. Well, what they had to do, they were banned all through Europe, and what Weishaupt did is he simply said, we've got to go somewhere. Let's take an organization that already exists. Let's infiltrate them, and let's change their tenets. That's when he moved the Illuminati to London, and they gnawed their way into British and Scottish Freemasonry.
Mm-hmm. You don't think Freemasonry was something that was already being run, like, out of Rome in the centuries before?
Out of Rome? I don't know how to respond to that.
Well, the reason why is because I've seen lots of images of churches, Catholic churches, where they include, the back and to the left symbol, the pyramid with the all-seeing eye and the suspended capstone.
That tells you that
just
British
like coins from like Switzerland in the 1500s, they got the IHS on them.
Well, the Illuminati wasn't for 200 years.
Well, I agree with you that there was definitely some sort of recodification, consolidation of Illuminati powers at that time, represented by what you're talking about.
Well, the Jesuits, of course, were the 16th century,
right.
But the Illuminati was the 18th century.
True.
All right, it's on you go. I just thought I'd, for myself, try and clear things up.
With Ledolchowski, okay? Another case, I said his life is framed. First you have the suspicious, 2 deaths on the same night, okay? Tell me, that's, saying the basic story is, he got them to agree to World War I, but he had a more extreme agenda. I mean, I think that the agenda he went to them is like, look, let's have Germany defeat Russia, and we're going to break off the part of Poland that's under Russian rule and make that an independent country. That at least was the plan. But Ledolchowski would have wanted Posen to go back, become Poznan again, and the whole Polish. And then Vladimir becomes the Black Pope. And to me, I get the feeling of that Vladimir got them to agree to some sort of let's start a war thing, but Vladimir had an agenda that extended further.
Well, I can add something here that I think is pretty relevant. The Turks allied themselves with the Germans, the Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
Now, just so you know, the Turks were taken over in 1909 by someone named Enver Pasha and his Young Turk Revolution. It was 1908. Well, I'm just going to quote, the Atlantic Monthly of last month. Quote, according to the two most senior of His Majesty's diplomats in Constantinople, Gerard Lowther and Gerald Fitzmaurice, Enver and his associates were rooted in crypto-Jewish Freemasonry, with its adeptness at manipulating occult forces, and modeled themselves in the French Revolution and its godless and leveling methods. The reason I quote that is this is something I know, and I'm not sure if you do or not, but what we call the Sabbateans allied themselves with the Germans. I don't know if this means much to you. It means a ton to me.
I never even knew of that. But it reminds me of the political dynamics that pervade.
All right, well, let's
get involved in something politically. It's always like a set agenda, and even no matter how flawed the agenda is, it doesn't matter if it's left or right. You can't alter it at all. No matter how much success you have with an idea, once you get beyond the mezzanine level, the second floor of a structure, everything is like, no. It's like it's centrally directed. I've noticed this in numerous things I've been involved with.
Well, if in fact Ledolchowski was manipulating, you're saying he was manipulating the upcoming First World War from behind the scenes.
Yes, with the Zimmerman telegram, which Tupper Southsea wrote about.
Yeah, I read the book. I've forgotten the book, but I read the book. It got the war started.
Right, the Zimmerman telegram comes out, and then at that press conference, he's asked about it, in public, and he says, "Oh yes, there's no denying it. We did it." Why, admit it like that? Why not deny it? It was like he was acting like a good little Freemason, good old boy. Well,
in the background to the First World War, unless the Jesuits, unless somehow Ledolchowski could manipulate a revolution in Turkey to overturn the Sultan and bring in these crypto-fascistic Freemasonry Jews, and they weren't Jews, they are Sabbateans. That's, if you don't know the concept, I'm not going to explain it to you. It would take too long, but there was a split in Judaism about 300 years before, and a very Hi, it's Barry Chamish for the next 2 hours. We've got a very interesting guest. He is Douglas Willinger. He's been reading me for years, and I guess there are some advantages to this. Now, he is the webmaster and editor of a site called ContinuingCounterReformation.blogspot.com, and most of this, I think it's going to be his show, although I made notes. A lot of this is just stuff beyond me. Douglas, are you there?
Yes.
Where do we start?
Basically, a whole outlook of reality of the whole occult power of the Roman Catholic Church, Masonic, ancient regime that people don't want to acknowledge, but even though it's actually the ruling shadow government.
I'm all ears. Start at any point, unless you want me to guide you.
If you want to give me a guide, that's okay. But if not, I can speak without that.
All right. Away you go.
Okay. Basically, I've long been fascinated by history and politics, and I remember like back in high school when I had second period, it was a library free period, and I was fascinated to go and read the old newspapers and magazines, like the Time and Newsweek type of magazines, and compare how the reporting, the style of reporting in the years leading up to each of the two major world wars. And what blew my mind was how they were all, very much anti-Kaiser, anti-Kaiserreich. Oh, the Kaiser was the evil devil incarnate, etc. But then in the 30s, these same media journals are saying Hitler's the gentleman. Hitler's a nice guy. And it just seemed to be like the total opposite of what it should have been. It struck me as totally bizarre, but it was just one of the first indications of this phenomenon.
What phenomenon? You're talking about the media being part of the plot? Is that the phenomena?
Yes, including the huge upturn in anti-Jewish writings in newspapers starting around 1919.
Right.
To scapegoat the Jews, so to speak, which was part of the Ledolchowski plan.
Well, you just gave a name that nobody knows about, so I guess you better dive into him. Exactly.
Okay, Vladimir Ledolchowski was the superior general, the Black Pope, if you will, of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order, which runs Georgetown University and by extent the government, etc. He was the Black Pope from February 11, 1915 to December 13, 1942. And he has a very interesting framing of his life, okay? He was the nephew of the Archbishop of an area of Poland that was part of Germany at the time, Posen. It's now known as Poznan. And what happened is when Bismarck was cracking down on the political power of the Catholic Church in the 1870s, this was one of the first things done by the Kaiserreich, 1871 to 1918.